I should have seen it coming when I was 12 and my brother Marcus got a brand new BMW for his 16th birthday while I got a card that said, "Maybe next year, sweetie." The pattern was established early. Marcus was the golden child, Harvard-bound, charismatic, destined for greatness according to our parents. I was the quiet one, the disappointment, the daughter who just didn't quite measure up. My parents, Richard and Catherine Hart, built their fortune in Florida real estate during the 1980s boom. By the time I was born, they owned 12 rental properties across Palm Beach County, luxury condos, beach houses, and a stunning estate in Wellington worth $3.2 million on its own. The rental income alone generated roughly $18,000 monthly. Combined with Dad's consulting business, we were comfortable. More than comfortable. But wealth doesn't guarantee love and success doesn't mean wisdom. Marcus was everything they wanted. He graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, married a corporate attorney named Vanessa who came from old money, and landed a position at a prestigious investment firm in Manhattan. Every family gathering became a celebration of Marcus's latest achievement. His promotion. His bonus. His new penthouse overlooking Central Park. I took a different path. I went to state college, studied accounting and finance and got my CPA certification. Nothing glamorous. Nothing that made mom's friends gasp with envy at country club luncheons. I worked for a mid-sized firm in Fort Lauderdale, lived in a modest apartment, and drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic. Still at that little accounting firm? Mom would ask at every holiday dinner, her tone dripping with disappointment. Marcus just closed a $50 million deal. Maybe you should ask him for career advice. The comparisons were relentless. The dismissals were constant. But I learned to smile, nod, and say nothing. What they didn't know, what nobody knew except my grandmother, was that I was playing a completely different game. My grandmother, Eleanor Hart, was my father's mother. Unlike my parents, she saw me. Really saw me. While Mom and Dad fawned over Marcus's Ivy League achievements, Grandma Eleanor noticed that I was the one who actually read financial statements for fun, who understood compound interest at age 14, who could spot a bad investment from a mile away. When I was 23, fresh out of college with my CPA certification, Grandma Eleanor called me to her estate in Wellington. The same estate my parents assumed would eventually become Marcus's crown jewel. "Tegan," she said, pouring us both tea in her sunroom, "I've been watching this family for 78 years. I know who has substance and who has shine. Your brother has shine. You have substance." I didn't understand what she meant. "Not yet. I'm going to transfer my properties to you," she continued. "Not in my will. No. While I'm alive. Irrevocable trust transfers, quit-claim deeds, the works. You'll own everything, the 12 rentals, the Wellington estate, all of it. But here's the condition. You don't tell anyone. Not for years. Let them think whatever they want to think." "Why?" I asked. Her eyes were clear and sharp. "Because I want to see who they really are when they think there's something to gain. And I want you to build something real while they're not watching. Can you do that?" I did. On March 15, 2019, my grandmother's attorney, Robert Chin, processed the paperwork. Every single property was transferred into the Eleanor Hart Irrevocable Trust with me as the sole beneficiary and trustee. The Wellington estate. All 12 rental properties scattered across Palm Beach County. Everything. The monthly rental income of $18,000 went directly into trust accounts I controlled. I wasn't taking vacations or buying luxury cars. I was reinvesting, improving, and expanding. My little accounting firm job? That was real, but it was also my cover. I worked hard, lived modestly, and let my family believe I was struggling along in my mediocre career. Meanwhile, I was learning everything I could about property management, real estate law, and trust administration. I used the rental income strategically. First, I paid off the remaining mortgages on 3 properties that still had balances, $340,000 total. Then I renovated the beach house in Delray Beach, increasing its rental value from $2,800 monthly to $4,200. I upgraded the Wellington Estate's security system, replaced the aging HVAC units, and refinished the hardwood floors. By 2021, the portfolio's value had increased from $8.2 million to $11.4 million. The monthly rental income had grown to $23,500. But I also noticed something disturbing in the accounting records. Marcus had convinced my parents to let him manage the properties back in 2017 before the transfer. He claimed his Manhattan real estate connections and business school expertise made him perfect for the role. My parents, always eager to give their golden child more responsibility, agreed immediately. What they didn't know was that Marcus was stealing. I discovered it while reviewing the old property management records that transferred with the deeds. Between 2017 and early 2019, Marcus had skimmed roughly $4,200 monthly from the rental accounts. He'd done it cleverly, inflating maintenance costs, creating fake vendor invoices, pocketing security deposits that were never returned to tenants. Over 26 months, he'd stolen approximately $109,000. When the properties transferred to me in 2019, the stealing stopped because Marcus no longer had access to the accounts. But he had no idea the ownership had changed. As far as he knew, Grandma still owned everything and he'd gotten away with his embezzlement. I documented everything. Bank statements, fake invoices, email trails. I hired a forensic accountant named Patricia Williams to create a comprehensive report. Then I locked it all in a safe deposit box and waited. Grandma Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep on October 3, 2023. She was 81 years old. I was there holding her hand. Her last words to me were, "Show them who you really are, sweetheart. When the time is right." The funeral was a spectacle. Mom wore Chanel and wept dramatically. Dad gave a touching eulogy about his mother's strength and wisdom. Marcus stood tall in his $3,000 suit, playing the devoted grandson. I wore a simple black dress from Target and stood quietly in the back. After the funeral, Marcus pulled me aside. "Listen, Tegan. I know this is hard, but we need to be practical about Grandma's estate. Mom and Dad are thinking everything should go to me since I'm the one who's been managing the properties. You understand, right? I'll make sure you get something small. Maybe $50,000 or so." I nodded. "Whatever the family decides." His smile was patronizing. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable." The email arrived on February 14, 2024. Valentine's Day. How fitting. Subject: Family Meeting Estate Distribution. From Marcus Hart to Tegan Hart. Keegan. Mom, Dad, Vanessa and I are meeting with the estate attorney on Saturday, March 2nd at 2 p.m. to finalize Grandma's estate distribution. This is really a family-only discussion about the properties and assets. Perhaps it's best you don't attend. These financial discussions can get complicated, and I know real estate law isn't really your area. We'll fill you in on the final decisions afterward. We're planning to formalize my ownership of the 12 rental properties and the Wellington estate. Makes sense given my experience managing them. Mom and Dad agree it's the right move. We'll make sure you receive a small inheritance. Probably around $50,000. Fair is fair. Best, Marcus. I read it 3 times, my coffee going cold in my hands. Then my phone rang. Tegan, honey, I hope you understand about the meeting. Your brother really deserves those properties. He's worked so hard managing them, and with his business expertise he'll make them even more valuable. You'll get something, of course. Marcus is being very generous. I understand, Mom. Good. I knew you would. You've always been so understanding. Not like some daughters who cause drama over inheritances. This is what Grandma would have wanted. The properties going to the child who can really do something with them. After she hung up, I sat in my apartment for a long time, looking at the framed photo on my bookshelf. It was me and Grandma Eleanor, taken in her garden 6 months before she died. She was smiling at me with such pride, such certainty. "Show them who you really are," she'd said. It was time. I called Robert Chin, the trust attorney, on February 15th. "Robert, it's Tegan Hart. I need you at a meeting on March 2nd at 2 p.m. My family is meeting with their estate attorney to discuss distributing Grandma's properties. They don't know about the 2019 transfers." There was a pause. Then a low whistle. "Oh my. This is going to be quite a revelation. I need you to bring every document. The trust papers, the quitclaim deeds, the transfer records. Everything. Consider it done. Tegan, are you sure you're ready for this?" "I've been ready for 5 years." Next, I called Patricia Williams, the forensic accountant who documented Marcus's embezzlement. "Patricia, remember that report you did on the Marcus Hart property management fraud?" "Of course. $109,000 in fraudulent charges between 2017 and 2019. Very clean case. Are you finally going to use it? March 2nd. Can you attend a meeting? I'll be there with bells on. Finally, I did something I rarely did. I went shopping. Not at Target this time. I drove to Worth Avenue in Palm Beach and bought a suit that cost more than my monthly rent. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored with shoes that cost $400. If I was going to reveal who I really was, I was going to look the part. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the scene, playing it over and over. Would Marcus scream? Would Dad finally see me as something other than a disappointment? Would Mom realize her golden child was a thief? Around 3 a.m. I got up and made tea. I sat at my kitchen table with all the documents spread out before me. Property deeds with my name. Trust papers with my signature. Bank statements showing 5 years of rental income flowing into my accounts. The forensic report with Marcus's crimes detailed across 47 pages. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. I arrived at the law offices of Hartman and Associates at 1:50 p.m. on March 2nd, 10 minutes early. The building was one of those old Palm Beach establishments with marble floors and oil paintings of founding partners. Money whispered from every corner. The receptionist looked surprised when I gave my name. Oh. Mr. Hart said it would just be 4 people today. I'm family, I said pleasantly. I'm sure there's room. She directed me to conference room B on the 3rd floor. I could hear them before I opened the door. Marcus's confident laugh. Mom's delighted giggle. Dad's approving rumble. They were having champagne. Actually celebrating before the meeting even started. When I opened the door, the conversation stopped. Marcus was at the head of the table in a navy suit that probably cost $4,000. Vanessa sat beside him in a cream-colored dress, her law school ring catching the light. Mom and Dad were on the opposite side, both looking tanned and relaxed from their recent Bahamas vacation. And at the far end of the table sat a man I didn't recognize. Presumably their estate attorney. Tegan, Marcus said, his smile freezing on his face. I thought I made it clear this was a private family meeting. I am family, I said, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table from him. Last I checked. Mom's voice had that edge I knew so well. Sweetheart, this is really about complex property transfers and estate law. Maybe it's better if... The door opened behind me. Robert Chin entered, carrying a leather briefcase that I knew contained every weapon I needed. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and the calm confidence of a man who'd practiced estate law for 40 years. Good afternoon, he said pleasantly. I'm Robert Chin, attorney for the Eleanor Hart Irrevocable Trust. I believe we're all here to discuss the estate distribution. Marcus's attorney stood up, confused. I'm sorry, who are you representing? I'm James Hartman and I'm handling the Eleanor Hart estate distribution for the family. Are you? Robert asked mildly. He set his briefcase on the table. That's interesting because I've been the trust attorney for Eleanor Hart since 2019. Perhaps there's been some confusion. The room went very quiet. Dad spoke up, his voice having that authoritative tone he used in business. Now see here, we don't know who you are, but we've already made arrangements with Mr. Hartman to transfer the properties to Marcus. Everything's been decided. Has it? I said softly. Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up slowly, channeling every ounce of Grandma Eleanor's quiet strength. Before we go any further, I think Mr. Chin should share some information about Grandma's estate. Don't you, Robert? Robert opened his briefcase with deliberate care. Of course, Ms. Hart. He pulled out a thick folder and placed it on the table. The label read, Eleanor Hart Irrevocable Trust, Property Transfers, March 2019. What is this? Marcus demanded, but his voice had lost some of its confidence. These, Robert said, opening the folder, are the property transfer documents executed by Eleanor Hart on March 15, 2019. On that date, Mrs. Hart transferred full ownership of all 12 rental properties and the Wellington estate to an irrevocable trust with her granddaughter, Tegan Hart, as the sole beneficiary and trustee. The silence was deafening. That's impossible, Marcus said, but he'd gone pale. I've been managing those properties for years. If there had been a transfer, I would have known. Would you? I asked quietly. Tell me, Marcus, when's the last time you actually checked the property ownership records? Or did you just assume that because you were stealing from the rental accounts in 2017 and 2018, you'd continue to have access forever? Vanessa's head snapped toward Marcus. What? I don't know what she's talking about, Marcus said quickly. Too quickly. Robert pulled out another document. This is the quit-claim deed for the Wellington estate. Filed with Palm Beach County on March 15, 2019. Owner: Tegan Marie Hart, trustee of the Eleanor Hart Irrevocable Trust. He spread out more documents one by one. Each property. Each deed. Each one with my name. Mom found her voice, but it was shaking. This can't be real. Mother would have told us. She would have told me. Would she? I asked, looking directly at her. Would she have told the mother who spent 30 years telling her granddaughter she was a disappointment? Who compared me to Marcus at every single family gathering? Who suggested repeatedly that I wasn't smart enough or successful enough to matter? Tegan, Dad started. She wanted to see who you really were, I continued. Who we all really were when you thought there was something to gain. And now I know. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. This is fraud. You manipulated an old woman. Mrs. Hart was 78 and in perfect mental health when she made these transfers, Robert interrupted smoothly. I have 3 physicians' certifications of mental competency, video recordings of the signing, and detailed notes about her reasoning. She was very clear about her intentions. Would you like me to play the video? She's quite eloquent about why she chose Tegan over you, Mr. Hart. The color drained from Marcus's face. But let's talk about fraud, I said, standing up. I nodded to the door. Patricia Williams entered, carrying her own briefcase. She was a sharp-looking woman in her 50s with the no-nonsense air of someone who'd spent decades following money trails. This is Patricia Williams, forensic accountant. Patricia, would you share your findings? Patricia opened her briefcase and pulled out a bound report. She placed it in front of Marcus. Between January 2017 and February 2019, you embezzled $109,000 from the Hart family rental properties. I have documented 167 instances of fraudulent invoices, skimmed security deposits, and inflated maintenance charges. Bank records, forged vendor signatures, everything. Vanessa grabbed the report and started flipping through it, her face going white. You told me those properties generated barely any income, she said to Marcus, her voice deadly quiet. You said they were break-even investments. I can explain, Marcus stammered. Can you? I asked. Can you explain the $4,200 monthly you were stealing? The fake invoices from contractors who don't exist? The security deposits from tenants that you pocketed instead of holding in escrow like the law requires. Dad was staring at Marcus like he'd never seen him before. You stole from your own grandmother? I was managing the properties. Marcus shouted. I deserved compensation for my work. You were paid a management fee, Patricia said calmly, flipping to a page in the report. 10% of monthly gross rents. $1,800 a month. You were stealing an additional $4,200 on top of that. And the stealing stopped in March 2019, I added. Want to know why? Because that's when the properties transferred to me. Suddenly you didn't have access to the accounts anymore. You didn't stop stealing because you grew a conscience, Marcus. You stopped because I locked you out. Mom was crying now, but I couldn't tell if it was from shame or shock. Mr. Hartman, their attorney, was frantically reviewing the documents Robert had spread across the table. These appear to be legitimate legal transfers. If Mrs. Hart executed these in 2019, then there is no estate to distribute. The properties aren't part of her estate. They've belonged to Ms. Hart for 5 years. That's correct, Robert said. There is no estate distribution to discuss. Ms. Hart has owned these properties outright since 2019. Marcus stood up so fast his chair fell backward. This is insane. You've been lying to us for 5 years? Pretending to be some struggling accountant while you stole our inheritance. Your inheritance? The words came out sharper than I intended. Let me be very clear, Marcus. Grandma gave you nothing. Not in her will. Not in any trust. Nothing. Because she watched you for 32 years and saw exactly who you are. A thief who steals from his own family. A man who values appearances over substance. Someone who would embezzle from his dying grandmother and call it compensation. And you're so perfect, he shot back. You manipulated her. Turned her against her own family. I loved her, I said quietly. I visited her every week. I read to her when her eyes got weak. I held her hand when she was dying. Where were you? Oh, that's right. In Manhattan, closing deals and sending Christmas cards twice a year. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa stood up, pulling her purse over her shoulder. We're leaving. Vanessa, Marcus started. No. I'm leaving. I'm going to call my father's attorney, because apparently I married a man who committed $109,000 in fraud and didn't think to mention it. Do not follow me. She walked out, her heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. Mom turned to me, her makeup running. How could you do this to us? To your own family? How could I? I stared at her. You sent me an email telling me not to come to my own grandmother's estate meeting. You've spent 30 years telling me I'm not good enough, not smart enough, not successful enough. You gave Marcus a BMW at 16 and gave me a card. You celebrated his every achievement and dismissed mine. And you're asking how I could do this to you. Dad's voice was quiet. What happens now? I looked at Robert. He pulled out one more document. Ms. Hart owns all 12 properties and the Wellington estate. Total portfolio value as of last month's appraisal, $14.7 million. She has several options. She can maintain the properties as rentals, sell them, or, he paused significantly, she can evict current occupants who are living in Hart family properties rent-free. Mom's face went white. You wouldn't. Wouldn't I? I asked. You and Dad have been living in the Wellington estate for 23 years. Did you ever wonder why you never received a rent bill after March 2019? I waved it. Out of respect for Grandma's memory and the hope, foolish apparently, that maybe you'd see me differently one day. And Marcus, Robert continued, has been listing the Delray Beach house as his Florida residence for tax purposes, despite living in New York. Ms. Hart has tolerated this fraud for 5 years. That's tax evasion, Patricia added helpfully. The IRS might be interested. Marcus had sunk back into his chair, his face in his hands. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steady. Patricia is filing her forensic report with the Palm Beach County State Attorney's Office on Monday. They'll decide whether to pursue criminal charges for the embezzlement. You can't, Marcus started. I can and I am. You stole $109,000. That's a third-degree felony in Florida. Up to 5 years in prison. Additionally, Robert said, Ms. Hart is formally notifying you that you no longer have permission to claim the Delray Beach property as your residence. You have 30 days to update your records with the IRS. Marcus looked like he might vomit. I turned to my parents. As for the Wellington estate, you can stay. For now. But here are my conditions. First, you will never again compare me to Marcus in my presence. Second, you will never again dismiss my career or my choices. Third, you will accept that I own these properties, I make the decisions, and your opinions on how I manage my assets are neither requested nor welcome. Mom opened her mouth, but Dad put a hand on her arm. For the first time in my life, my father looked at me with something that might have been respect. Understood, he said quietly. One more thing, I said. I've been paying for your property taxes, insurance and maintenance on the Wellington estate for 5 years. That's approximately $180,000 in expenses I've covered while you lived there rent-free. I'm not asking for repayment. Consider it my gift. But it ends now. Starting April 1st, you'll pay market rent of $6,500 monthly, or you'll move out. Your choice. The room was absolutely silent. Robert began packing up his documents. I believe that concludes our business here. Mr. Hartman, I'm sorry you were brought here under false pretenses. The Hart family properties are not in probate and are not available for distribution. They belong to Ms. Tegan Hart free and clear. Mr. Hartman looked relieved to escape. Understood. If you need anything, Ms. Hart, please don't hesitate to call. He practically ran from the room. I gathered my own papers, slipping them into my bag. When I looked up, Marcus was staring at me with pure hatred. You're going to regret this, he said. No, Marcus. I don't think I am. I walked toward the door, but Mom's voice stopped me. Tegan. Wait. I turned. He was crying, really crying now. Not the performative tears she did so well at funerals and charity galas. Real tears. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I wanted to feel something. Vindication maybe. Or satisfaction. But all I felt was tired. I know, I said. And then I left. The next 72 hours were chaos. On Sunday morning my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. Aunt Linda. Uncle John. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. The family gossip network had activated with lightning speed. The messages were variations on a theme. Is it true? How much are you worth? Can you loan me money? I always knew you were special. I blocked most of them. On Monday, Patricia filed her forensic report with the state attorney's office. By Tuesday afternoon, Marcus received a letter informing him he was under investigation for grand theft and fraud. Vanessa filed for divorce on Wednesday. The divorce filing was public record, and somehow it made it to the Palm Beach Post-Society section. Manhattan investment banker's marriage crumbles amid fraud allegations. They didn't use Marcus's name, but everyone in our social circle knew exactly who they meant. Mom called me 17 times on Wednesday. I didn't answer. Finally, she sent a text. Please. We need to talk. Your father wants to apologize properly. On Thursday, I drove to the Wellington estate. It looked exactly as it had for 20 years. Pristine grounds, white columns, the fountain that Grandma Eleanor had loved. I sat in my car for a long moment before going inside. Dad answered the door. He looked older than I remembered. More tired. Tegan. Thank you for coming. Mom was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the white sofa like a guest in her own home. Which I suppose she was now. I'll make tea, Dad said, disappearing toward the kitchen. Mom and I sat in awkward silence until he returned with 3 cups of chamomile tea, Eleanor's favorite. Your grandmother used to serve this, Dad said quietly, handing me a cup. Every Sunday afternoon when I'd visit as a boy. She'd lecture me about being responsible with money, about character over credentials. He paused. I forgot those lessons somewhere along the way. Richard, Mom started. No, Catherine. Let me say this. He looked at me directly. I've spent 30 years building you up in my mind as a disappointment. The daughter who didn't go to Harvard. Who didn't marry into the right family. Who didn't dazzle at cocktail parties. He set down his cup. I was wrong. Painfully, stupidly wrong. You took your grandmother's lessons to heart, he continued. You built something real. You managed a $14.7 million portfolio at 29 years old. You did it quietly, competently, without fanfare. And I was too blind to see it because I was too busy celebrating your brother's shine. Mom was crying again. I don't know how to make this right. I don't know if you can, I said honestly. 30 years is a long time to be invisible to your own parents. Will you let us try? Dad asked. Not for the properties or the money. I understand those are yours and we have no claim. But for a relationship. A real one this time. I thought about Grandma Eleanor, about her quiet wisdom and her long game. She wanted me to show you who I really am, I said. But I think she also wanted to show me who you really are. Not the people you pretend to be at country clubs. The people you are when the illusions break. And, Mom whispered, who are we? I don't know yet, I admitted. But maybe we can find out. If you're willing to do the work. We are, Dad said immediately. Whatever it takes. I set down my teacup. Then here's where we start therapy. Family therapy. All 3 of us. We unpack 30 years of damage with a professional, or we don't have a relationship at all. Mom looked shocked. Dad looked thoughtful. Agreed, he said. I'll find someone this week. And the rent starts April 1st, I reminded them. This isn't charity. This is business. Understood, Dad said. That's more than fair. I stood to leave. Mom caught my hand. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, she said. I know, I said. She told me so. Every week for 5 years while you were too busy celebrating Marcus to visit her. The truth hurt, but it needed to be said. September 2024. 6 months after the inheritance meeting that changed everything. Marcus was indicted on 3 counts of grand theft and 2 counts of fraud. His attorney negotiated a plea deal. Full restitution of $109,000, 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and permanent prohibition from serving as a property manager in Florida. His investment firm terminated him. His divorce was finalized in June. Last I heard he was working for a small firm in New Jersey, rebuilding his life from scratch. We haven't spoken. Vanessa sent me a letter in July. A real letter, handwritten on expensive stationery. She apologized for not seeing the signs of Marcus's fraud earlier. She thanked me for exposing the truth before they had children together. She ended with, "You saved me from a life built on lies. I'm grateful even though this year has been hell." I wrote back. "We've had coffee twice. He's good people. My parents sold their Bahamas timeshare and the luxury cars. They downsized their lifestyle significantly to afford the $6,500 monthly rent on the Wellington estate. Dad retired from consulting. Mom quit the country club. They show up to therapy every week. We're making progress. Slowly. Some wounds take years to heal, but at least we're trying. I expanded the property portfolio. Used the equity in the existing properties to acquire 3 more rentals in Fort Lauderdale. The portfolio now generates $31,000 monthly in rental income and is valued at $18.3 million. I still work at my little accounting firm. I like the work. I like the normalcy. I like being Tegan the CPA, not Tegan the real estate heiress. But I also joined the board of the Palm Beach County Women's Business Network. I mentor young women who are building businesses. I give talks about financial literacy and strategic wealth building. And sometimes when I'm alone in the Wellington estate, I moved in after Mom and Dad decided they wanted somewhere smaller. I sit in Grandma Eleanor's sunroom and have tea. I imagine her there smiling that knowing smile. "You showed them who you really are," I say aloud to her memory. And I swear I can hear her response on the wind. "No, sweetheart. You showed them who you really are. There's a difference." He's right, of course. She usually was. This was never about proving anything to my parents or putting Marcus in his place. It was about becoming the person Grandma Eleanor saw in me when I was 23 and didn't see it myself yet. The girl who understood that substance beats shine. The woman who plays the long game. The heir who was worthy of the trust she placed in me. Last week, I received a letter from the Palm Beach County Property Appraiser's office. The Wellington estate's value had been reassessed. Due to the improvements I'd made and the market appreciation, it's now worth $4.8 million. I called my financial advisor and asked her to run projections. At the current rate of appreciation and rental income reinvestment, my portfolio could be worth $30 million by 2030. Grandma Eleanor started with 12 properties and a vision. I'm going to build an empire. Not for the money, though that's nice. Not to prove anything to my family, though they're watching now. But because she believed in me when no one else did. And I owe it to her memory to become everything she knew I could be. My phone buzzes. It's a reminder for tonight's family therapy session. I grab my keys and head for the door, pausing at the photo of Grandma Eleanor in the hallway. She's in her garden, laughing at something I said, the sun catching her silver hair. "Thank you," I whisper to the photograph, "for seeing me, for trusting me, for teaching me that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming undeniable." And then I walk out into the Florida sunshine, the owner of $18.3 million in real estate, the trustee of my grandmother's legacy, and finally, the daughter my parents see. Not because I changed, because they finally opened their eyes.